frequent flyer plan at the bar here. But seriously, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry about coming out here late like this, but there's only 3 kinds of people in this world. Those who can count, and those who can't. 3 kinds of people. All right, look, this friend of mine from Australia was telling me last time she flew home, she rented a car, but the GPS was all in Japanese. Yeah, which is a funny thing because, I had a similar situation. I had to drive from Philadelphia Airport to Moorestown, New Jersey, but GPS was all like, hey, you gotta get way the hell over on the right. Let me tell you about all the strange shit that happened to me at my stepfather's funeral a couple days ago. Every day for 3 days, I found myself involved in this whole weird chain of events. Stuff that seemed to have some kind of spiritual significance. No, seriously. Maybe either that or I'm losing my fucking mind here. What's that, ma'am? Oh, yeah, well, who made you the mental health poster child? Yeah. Look, nobody saw Sasquatch, okay? There were no UFO sightings, nobody found the face of Jesus in a potato chip or nothing like that. No, I mean, you could take any of these odd occurrences I'm talking about and say, I was probably just having a few rough days at a critical time in my life, and, no big deal. I'm more than willing to play devil's advocate here. Actually, I did run this by a couple of friends of mine, and they both said the same thing. Odd stuff happens at funerals. People get overwrought. Fall into a kind of religious frenzy. There's one guy I heard about actually climbed into the coffin along with the deceased, crying, "Take me with you!" Oh, no, I'm not kidding. So yeah, people do get carried away. That doesn't fit in my case. And I'll tell you what. You understand, my stepfather was this real religious guy, and just hard as hell to get along with because he always thought he knew what was right for you better than you knew yourself. I think it was because he came from a family of Orthodox rabbis and always wanted to be one himself, but he didn't have the smarts for it, see? He could never make the cut. Yeah, that had to be rough, being the underachiever and among a bunch of hotshots like that. But believe me, he pretty much made up for that later on, throwing his weight around whenever he could. Long story short, he could be an incredible pain in the ass. But here's the deal, see? Even at his most overbearing, he was still acting out of his belief in some pretty high ideas. This is true. So I always had some real mixed feelings towards the guy. He meant well, he just had a habit of rubbing people the wrong way. It was a fucking career. It was his reason for living. So when I heard that he passed away, I found that I was feeling a lot more relieved than grieved about it. But I wasn't happy being all freaks like that. I mean, he was my stepfather for a long time, you know? And in spite of everything, he only wanted good things for me. As control freaks go. But still, how could I be so blasé on such a momentous occasion? That was really troubling me. Though I gotta tell you, the guy put us through a hell of a lot of changes in his time, which might account for my being a little ambivalent about things. Shit, it might account for my being a fucking basket case. See, I was like 13 years old, and my brother was 15 when our mother married the guy. Our real father had this very untimely, fatal heart attack, leaving Mom to raise our 5-year-old sister and us 2 teenage boys. Now, stepdad there was a divorcee, which isn't too hard to imagine. No, it's not too hard to imagine that the first wife ran screaming to the judge to get her the hell out of there. Be that as it may, our freshly extended family, the newlyweds, my brother and sister and me, and 2 of his 3 boys all took up residence in a big house about 5 blocks away from where we had grown up. Now, why my mother put up with his sorry ass for as long as she did was a matter of no little controversy for the longest time. You see, because although he had high ideals, he wasn't anybody's idea of a model parent or great husband either, for that matter. I mean, he was nervous and defensive and pushy. And plus, he was ultra-religious and was always trying to coax us into being true believers, too. Which is not so bad, really, except none of us shared his enthusiasm. I mean, we were September Jews. We'd show up on the high holy days. That's about it. When we were little, our mother would take us to see Santa Claus. That's how Jewish we were. I suppose the Gentile equivalent would be like your P&L Catholics showing up on Christmas and Easter. What? P&L? Poinsettias and lilies. What, you need me to explain this to you? Jeez. Well, so Mom had wed in haste because she was lonely, no doubt, but mostly because I guess she was afraid of having to raise 3 growing kids on her own. Now, you can't blame her there, but somehow she must have fallen into an any port in a storm mentality. Why, Mom? Why? What was the big rush, huh? I come from whacked out people, that's why. Single parenthood wasn't much in vogue back then either. You gotta give her that. See, before the stepfather cometh, we're raised in the close-knit innocence of the 50s and 60s. Ours was a neighborhood of row homes and ma and pa shops nestled in a big city on the East Coast. Sweet home West Philadelphia, that would be. See, on our block, neighbors were like family. I mean, even to where we called the adults by familial names. Hey, yo! Aunt Charlotte! Or, hey, Uncle Reuben! At any given moment, old ladies could come up to you, pinch your cheeks, and shower you with terms of affection in Yiddish. Oh, kinachere, such a beautiful boy, which basically means not to put a jinx on it, but you're the cutest thing I ever seen. Now I look in the mirror, I wonder what the hell happened. Glory is fleeting. So in coming from that neighborly environment, you understand, by any standard for teenage boys who not too long ago had lost their father, I'm saying we were pretty, willing, to see our mother remarry. Not that we were jubilant about it or anything. I mean, we met the guy and we were like, hey, yo, we are willing to work with you guys, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, but seriously, everybody knows that step-parenting is difficult at best. And a light touch is always recommended, right? Huh? Of course, right. Light touch, that's funny. You know, my stepfather could not tread lightly in a field of landmines. When we talk about landmines, the year was 1967 and the news was full of riots, social upheaval, and youth movements, none of which thrilled old stepdad any, I can tell you that. See, now you bring his special brand of high anxiety to bear, you know, the advent of a whole new domestic scene, and you throw in the social climate of the turbulent 60s, old stepdad had to be having a terrible time with it. You see, his personal demons had to be working overtime because somewhere in the back of his head, he had to be anticipating some kind of militant uprising from us kids. You know, complete with black berets and dark sunglasses. I mean, it was all over the tube back then. You couldn't miss it. All power to the stepsons, right on. Death to the imperialist stepfathers. All power to the stepsons. Yeah, I guess that's why when the time came and we were finally face to face with this guy, he totally gave off this vibe like he decided that it was his job as new head of the household to correct all our dangerously misguided attitudes. I'm saying this was a guy who saw problems where there were none and then wouldn't leave it alone until the problems became a reality. Not only was he waiting for the other shoe to drop, he could and would effectively drop it himself. I remember the exact moment that we knew we were in for a rough time of it with this guy. It was over one of the first, it was over the first dinner that we ate in the new house. A quick all-pie cuisine it was. We were having chicken pot pies followed by slices of apple pie. Simple, right? When my brother and I finished our entrees and asked for dessert, the new stepfather insisted that we use the same dishes, still swimming as they were with chicken gravy and a wayward pea here and there, to receive the apple pie slices. Now, you know, we weren't gourmets by any stretch of the imagination, but we knew a loathsome suggestion when we heard it. I mean, what? Was it his idea of how to save on dish soap and water? Maybe what he had in mind was the way things are done in an army mess tent. Were we in the army now? Maybe he was about pulling in the reins on us from the get-go, you know, stating right off the head, no way are you going to ride roughshod over me with your picky teenage ways. Not in my house, you're not. A preemptive strike of sorts then. Maybe that's what it was. Well, whatever it was, we waited for him to explain himself, but when he didn't, we politely felt him out on the matter. Please, sir, these dishes still have gravy on them? Or haven't you noticed, strange man? All of a sudden, we saw that we had touched a nerve with the guy. And though taken by surprise, still we marveled at the speed and intensity of his reaction. In an instant, he was just livid at having his methods brought into question. And he exploded with his strained, raspy voice, his face changing colors. What the hell's the difference? It all goes the same place. I mean, he went way the hell off on us, you know, as if we had been provoked beyond all reason and decorum. And trivial though it seemed, he clearly had no interest in meeting us halfway on this thing. Well, the bullshit meters of teenage boys are curiously accurate, and ours were spiking off the dials. Knowingly, we looked at each other. And in a moment, the appeal went forth to a higher court, and a cry in unison was heard throughout the house, if not throughout the neighborhood. Mom! And with her swift intervention our more accustomed dining procedure was reinstated, and a precedent was set thereby, such that apple pie in the new house would henceforth and forevermore be served without benefit of chicken gravy. Oh, so I guess a brother can get a clean dish now. Ain't this something? Nevertheless, the damage was done. The new stepfather and we were off to a very bad start. And we only got more and more cautious of the guy because he never got any better. So you see, I came by, this attitude of mine, honestly. I mean, please take my word for it. There's nothing I could tell you that would accurately convey just what a difficult guy this was. Sure, I mean, yeah, there's things I could tell you that would begin to illustrate it, but unless you knew the guy as we did, I don't think you would ever understand just what a tremendous pill he was. But understand this. He was married to our mother, whom we adored. So it became a thing where, even if he couldn't tread lightly, we felt we had to. I mean, for her sake. But even though we restrained ourselves, this unusually trying man inspired us regularly to guerrilla warfare. And we found we could vent our frustration with these hit-and-run wisecracks that we make. Insider insults just vague enough to mock him without us catching on. It was a challenge to us as natural humorists and freedom fighters to see if we could get away with it. Vive la resistance! Resiste father, he has, how you say, a stick up his ass. A stick up. Of course, it didn't always work. And then there was hell to pay. But that never stopped us from firing off a discreetly barbed zinger when we were so inspired. We couldn't help it. It was our only recourse. That and copping a plea with Mom when things get too far out of hand. See, he always took himself so seriously. I mean, he left himself wide open for that sort of thing. We called him the harp behind his back. The harp! The harp! And that's because he would always repeat this line like he thought he was being all so freaking diplomatic. Now, I don't mean to harp on this with you boys, but... And then he would do just that! Get all so fucking fired up about a bunch of bullshit. It was all we could do to keep him laughing in his face. But of all of us, his own sons could tolerate it the least. That became real obvious, too, once they were grown and out of the house. I mean, phone calls became infrequent, visits even more so. I liked the oldest boy, because he was obviously experienced in these matters. He was the one that told me that you could put on a jacket and tie, head up to the synagogue just as the services were letting out, and everyone would think that you had been there the whole time. Yeah. I liked the youngest one too as soon as I met him. But in the case of the surly middle-born son, the dip, he called him, stands for dipshit. Yeah, teenagers, what are you gonna do, huh? Yeah, in the case of the dip, once he was grown, all further contact with his father after that would result in another of their titanic clash of wills. I'm saying there was a lot of yelling that I had to listen to if I happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, which I often was. Now, we stepchildren, on the other hand, we tried to get along with the guy. I mean, we knew enough to keep up appearances anyway. Well, one day, I was passing through just as the harp was on the horn with this most defiant dip. And somebody must have got flipped off big time because the air of resentment in the kitchen there was thick. And oh yeah, I just freaking knew it was coming. hanging up. Old stepdad there just couldn't resist the urge to go on and on about it, ranting away, all at my expense, of course. Finally, he summed it all up for me with what he must have thought was the ultimate irony. I don't know what the hell's the matter with that damn kid, but you kids make me feel 10 feet tall. Oh, yeah? See, I told you we knew how to keep up appearances, but this was an invitation no smart aleck kid like me could resist. Elementary old chap. Though I do see the discrepancy to which you are referring, I must point out that what truly separates us from your own children, you see, is that, unlike them, we were fortunate enough to have grown up without having known you. What? Oh, I say it's very good indeed. Oh, it's quite so. It's, I don't believe I did that shit. It's pretty mean, huh? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Mom had to have been around somewhere because only her presence could have kept all hell from breaking loose. But I must have hit upon the truth because nothing else was ever said about that. Now, the pleasure I took in flaming him like that kind of embarrasses me, so what I'm telling you. When it comes to my stepfather, given our history of mutual antagonism, the temptation to ridicule the guy is irresistible. I mean, it's nostalgic even. But, no, see, a strict account is best here because I want you to see how all this weird stuff happened, right? Okay. I know it never comes up much, if at all. But if it ever does, you can quote me on this. There is nothing more useless and out of date than what you gotta go through at a Jewish funeral. Nothing. I'll tell you what I'm talking about. Here are all these customs, right? Stuff that's more superstition than anything, really, that you gotta go through when someone in your immediate family dies. And you gotta go step by step through these ancient symbolic acts, just exactly as they've always been done, in order to signify to everyone, and presumably to God, that no matter what your real feelings happen to be, having someone in your family die on you has hit you like a freaking thunderbolt, like 2 tons of terracotta. You know what I'm saying? For starters, all the mirrors in the house have to be covered up. Why? Because it's symbolic, supposedly, of how you're so totally beside yourself, you couldn't possibly, you wouldn't even want to, not for a minute, consider your own appearance. Now, say maybe your makeup is wrong, you want to splash a little cold water on your face, run a comb through your hair, what have you, you gotta sneak off to the bathroom when nobody's looking, where God forbid you might take a moment out of your mandatory meltdown not to look a freaking mess. I mean, as we all gathered there at Mom's prior to the funeral, I couldn't help but notice that nobody's all that terribly sad here. Everyone seems to be sharing the same sense of relief. I mean, even Mom to some extent. I mean, I'm sorry, okay, but, I'm afraid the simple truth of the matter is that, old stepdad was even more of a pain in the ass when he got sick, which, frankly, you wouldn't have thought was humanly possible. And he kept us all running our asses off for him, especially Mom. I mean, we seriously thought that his being sick was going to kill her. See, he was never so poor that he couldn't call her up with this endless array of requests and requisitions, stuff that kept her running to and from hospitals much more by far than was in her best interest. The food's no good here. I think you're going to have to bring me my prayer book. I'm going to need some clean underwear. And this went on for years. My sister's husband coined a new category of mental illness for the guy. Instead of ADD, attention deficit disorder, you heard of that? Huh? Yes. Thank you. He came up with a diagnosis of CADD.
What's that?
I'm glad you asked. Center of Attention Deficit Disorder. Consequently, no mirror left uncovered was about to distract anyone from any gut-wrenching emotion, because no one had all that much fucking affection for the guy to begin with. Okay, maybe that's a little harsh. Oh, fuck me, no it's not. Another thing that you gotta do is set out these real low to the ground little benches about the size of a shoe shine box. Traditionally, the immediate family sits on nothing but these hard-ass little benches for a week after the funeral. So look, just in case you were worried that having a death in the family isn't difficult enough, squat on nothing but these rock-hard little benches for 7 days and nights after the funeral. Soon you're going to see, hey, it's not a problem here. Things are tougher than you thought. More of that pages they took us anyway. And then there is this business of immediate family members pinning on this little black ribbon button, right? And once you pin it on, you rip the material partially, right? Another symbol of suffering, a bereavement so devastating you're ready to rip your clothes to pieces in anger, see? But look, just in case by some bizarre quirk of fate you don't feel particularly devastated, not to worry, see? You pin on the little black ribbon button, you rip the material, and then, like magic, you'll be ripping your freaking hair out. Hey, don't you say a fucking word, okay? Oh, and then there is this business where immediate family members come and sit around the Shiva home with their shoes off for a week. Again, symbolizing an emotional burden so momentous, so immobilizing, you couldn't imagine yourself going down to the corner 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. Or even if you had a Slurpee, there's no way you could enjoy it, so there'd be no point in going to get one. But now, let's say, God forbid, you had a sudden urge to eat a cheese steak. That might be different. Oh yeah, you see, a true Philadelphian understands that in this life you must know your limitations. And I apologize if it strikes you as a callous thing to say, okay, but frankly, nothing takes this thing out of death like a cheese steak. No, I'm talking thinly sliced, lean chip steak grilled to savory perfection with onions and mushrooms and peppers and all loaded onto a fresh Amoroso's Italian roll with melted provolone. Hey, you put on a little ketchup, a little mayonnaise, you run it through the garden, you're in business. Throw in a Frank's orange soda, tasty cake for dessert. Yeah, I'm talking manna from heaven here, eh? Well, I always thought, too, that having your family members hanging out in their stocking feet all week ran counter to the whole grief-struck thing anyway, because it really tends to turn would-be mourners into podiatric paparazzi. Podiatric paparazzi. Oh, sir, doesn't Uncle Nate have a shapely foot? Oh, Aunt Frances has flat-feeling bunions. She just trudged all through that cemetery in those open-toed shoes, and now she's going to take them off? Oh, stinky ridicule. And they expect to bring families together like this? But you know, actually, isn't all this stuff about the same thing, really? The warm fuzzies that you get thinking that you and your peeps got the inside edge, being all members of an exclusive club. A club which, wouldn't you know, God just happens to prefer over all others. Yeah, clearly a lot of people get a lot of mileage out of thinking that God plays favorites like that. You know, and if you're very devout, you might actually figure out what really tickles God's fancy and so enter the inner sanctum of the most favored. Hey, to each his own, that's what I say. But as any historian will tell you, people who think they got God on their side aren't so live and let live about it. They're more, do as I do, or believe me, I'm going to freaking pester you about it till you come around to my way of thinking. Hey, one such a person was my stepfather. He only got to pester me until I was 52, though. Not that the process of turning my back on the religion of my upbringing hadn't already begun. See, when our real father died, I was like 11 years old, and my brother was 13. Now, at that age, like a lot of East Coast kids, you know, our sole passion was for the games we played out on the street with our friends. I mean, we didn't care about religion, unless it was demanded of us. Now, in Judaism, when a father dies, the sons go to synagogue every day at dusk to say a mourner's prayer. I mean, every day. What, did I mention every day? Yeah, I'm talking every freaking day for a whole damn year, and it's no casual affair either. I mean, you gotta come in and get bathed with a jacket and tie. It is hardly an adult, let alone any 11-year-old kid that does anything every day for 365 straight days. Father just passed away so suddenly. My brother and I saw how our lives had indeed changed in the twinkling of an eye. And we wanted to do what was expected of us. But after 2 months of coming in every single day, getting cleaned up and dressed, hiking the 4 blocks to the synagogue, and sitting through the service for the mourner's prayer to be said, and then hiking back again, it began to feel a little like an imposition. So my brother and I decided to tweak the system a little. We decided to ride our bikes to the synagogue. Oh yeah, we were glad to do our part to keep faith alive. You should have seen us sweating our little asses off in our jackets and ties, pedaling away, kind of like I am right now. The only problem was there was no place to lock the bikes up at the synagogue, so we stashed them in this vestibule for safekeeping while we went inside and waited through the service for the mourner's prayer to be said. And then we were just about to kick back with some ceremonial grape juice, which was at least something tasty they gave you for being there, when this seriously grouchy elder lit into our asses big time for parking the bikes in the vestibule. I mean, you'd have thought we did something really heinous because this old fart was all over us about it. Making a big deal of shaming us in front of everybody. Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? And where did you think this is? And blah, 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 and all at the top of his voice. That was the beginning of the end. My brother looked at me, and I at him, in silent indignation. We were secretly dreaming up big boy comebacks. Hey, hey, yo, we've been coming here every day for 2 months, and You're gonna dog us about a couple of bikes? Oh, nice, nice. Nice way to make a couple of kids trying to do the right thing feel totally ignorant. Hey, but guess what, Chief? When the time comes and people ask us why we dropped out of the tribe, yeah, oh, that's right, Mr. Grumpy. It's all gonna be on you. You happy now? Bitch! You know, I think a lot of people have similar stories. You know, it's not that the secular life calls necessarily. It's that holier than thou types fill you with such disdain for all this rigmarole that eventually you're sickened by it. My brother and I saddled up and rode our bikes off into the sunset that day. It was with that very sense of scorn and finality. Little did we realize what would soon be in store for us. You know, it didn't take long to recognize that our new stepfather was one of the most inner sanctum sorts that we'd ever encountered. And it was real strange, too, you know, because, I'm not kidding you, he woke up at dawn every single day without fail to pray. And he'd been doing this all his life. You know, I mean, yarmulke, prayer shawl, prayer book, phylacteries. That's these frightening leather apparatuses that you wrap around your arm and you wear on your head when you pray. I mean, the whole 9 yards, you know. And he spooked you too, you know, because you'd be getting up to get a drink of water or something. Oh, there he be, all alone in the dark, rocking back and forth in a sofa chair, every day at dawn praying. I mean, we didn't know what to make of it. He was tenacious, we could see that much. All right, enough of that. On the day of the funeral, here we all are, crammed into Mom's place, and the limousine shows up. And I'm going, well, this ought to be short and sweet. I mean, you know, as unpopular as this nitpicking ninny was, I figured there ought to be like, yeah, you know, I don't know, you know, a handful of other people in attendance at best. But upon arriving at the synagogue, what the fuck? Here is just a mob, fully 300 people or more, who have showed up to pay their last respects. My stepfather has packed the house. What is up with this? So we're making our way through this parting sea of visiting dignitaries, and it's like, it reminds me of a Hollywood premiere. And I'm facing serious challenges to certain long-held attitudes of mine, because there could be little doubt, all of a sudden, that in certain circles, my stepfather was a well-respected man. I mean, so, you know, somebody pinched me here. I'll tell you what's up with that. See, I checked it out with Mom. Okay, you see, he was a charitable fundraiser of sorts. You know, he did some good. You know, he helped build the synagogue. There's a big surprise. But, you know, he also, he raised funds for the United Way. He helped high school students get college scholarships. You know, he believed that giving back, you know, was a sacred thing to him. But according to Mom, you see, he was very unprofessional in the way he went about it. I'll tell you something funny that she told me once. They were sitting in a restaurant when from across the dining room, these businessmen shouted something really snide at him. They said, hey, yo, hey, hey, no, don't come over here. We don't have any money to give you today either. And right then, my mother realized that this man she married made a habit of hounding people in the community for money as doggedly as he'd nag us about trifles at home. You see that? Although he had high ideals at home or away, making a nuisance of himself was what he did best. After the service, I stood in the line and tried to pretend for a minute that I really wanted to greet 300 some odd people I'd never met. You can talk about awkward. After about heartfelt declarations of sympathy, I discreetly headed for the bathroom, but not before overhearing one very telling, reassuring comment being made to my mother. A tearful elderly woman had taken her hand. "I weiß mir," she said, "he wasn't a difficult man." Yeah? See, my stepfather was infamous, having raised chutzpah to new heights. I mean, this was God's self-ordained right-hand man here I'm talking about. No one would ever take him for an underachieving rabbi wannabe. All right, so now maybe you see what it was that brought all those people there, all right? But I gotta tell you, sitting in the limousine on the way to the cemetery, it didn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense to me. But no, really, right? That ought to qualify as a strange and unexpected event, right? Don't worry, it gets stranger. As we pulled to a stop closest to the grave site, my gaze fixed on the scene out of the passenger side window. As it stood, we'd be observing burial rites next to a 10-ton backhoe, parked not 6 feet from the freshly dug grave. Don't they usually wait for the mourners to leave before they bring in the heavy machinery? I mean, that's only decent. I mean, this is a solemn occasion here. I mean, you know, it would be one thing if it had like black ribbons on it or something. Hey, but you know, there's no camouflaging a $70,000 pneumatic shovel. I mean, where's the respect? Well, what was I going to do? Go drive it away? Write a strongly worded letter? Finally, I figured, hey, you know, what difference does it make? But even as I was coming to that conclusion, I looked out the windshield of the limousine and was even more shocked by what I saw there. And, all right, I'm not kidding you. I'm not making this up. I mean, you couldn't make up something like this. 4 mud-spattered, hard hat-wearing Latino grave diggers were hustling up to the hearse and dragging my stepfather's coffin out of it. In a minute, they pulled it out and had it on a dolly, and I'm like, what the fuck are they doing? Does anybody beside me have a problem with this? All right, now look, I am not kidding you when I tell you that manhandling a loved one's coffin like that in plain view of the burial party is a desecration bordering on some kind of atrocity. I mean, thank God neither my mother nor my sister saw it. I don't know how they could have missed it. Too lost in thought, I guess. Had they known what was going on, I guarantee you there would have been a scene of epic proportion, complete with, you know, wild hysterics and maybe even fainting dead on the spot. I mean, something had to be done. And I got out of the limousine and started heading up to where the action was. Now, I still can't tell you what it was all about. I don't know, maybe there was some kind of dispute with the cemetery owners about overtime, I don't know. All I do know is that these scrambling little blue-collar guys were just hell-bent on getting the job over and done with. Why nobody put a stop to this, I don't understand that. I was thinking maybe there had to be a language barrier or something, because the next thing I know, my uncle is calling me over to help lend a hand carrying the coffin. And in Judaism, immediate family members are not supposed to be pallbearers. You know why? I'll give you one guess.
Because they're related.
Huh?
Because they're related.
Good guess, but no. It's because you're supposed to be so overwhelmed with grief you couldn't possibly lift anything. There's a big surprise. So now, instead of putting a stop to it, now I'm breaking tradition, carrying the coffin to the grave, our solemn stately group consisting of my uncle, myself, and 4 not-so-diplomatic ambassadors from south of the border. I mean, it was funny and ghoulish all at the same time. I mean, just when you thought the guy was going to get to go out with a shred of dignity, huh? Nuh-uh. Now, I've been to a few burials, okay, and I know for a fact that the way things go is, you know, the coffin sits up on these straps, right, while everyone gathers around and the clergy eulogizes the departed, and only after that is the thing lowered down. But these grave digger guys just didn't give a fuck and started the thing on its slow descent as soon as it hit the straps. Right about then, the rest of the motorcade started pulling up, and it was interesting to see people's reactions as they came to recognize that standard protocol was not the order of the day. Hey, they're lowering it already. Many were very upset to see what was going on and came quick stepping down to the grave. My poor sister arrived on the double. She was in tears and appealed to me, you know, as if there was something I could do about it. She said, I wanted to put this mezuzah on his coffin. Well, now would be the time. And she proceeded directly to her purpose while she still could. About then, the rest of those in attendance at the synagogue started pulling up, and it was funny because, no doubt, the grave diggers wised up in a hurry once they saw how badly they were outnumbered and just what kind of a riot they were going to have on their hands if they tried to fill this grave prematurely. They retreated behind the backhoe, and in one case up into the operator's cab, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, you freaking Philistines. What, this is somebody's funeral here, eh? You were trying to have, I don't know, you know, a little religious ceremony here, eh? And although the coffin had already hit bottom, the rabbi began his eulogy as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Now, you know how at a burial everyone throws like a trowel full of dirt into the open grave? Well, we did that. But it seemed like we were having a real bonanza this day in terms of available landscaping equipment, because along with the backhoe, which loomed all the more imposingly now that one of the demon grave diggers was sitting up in the cab staring down at us, along with the backhoe, there were 4 heavy-duty spades planted handles up in the dirt pile there. Obviously, they thought they were going to use those right away, too. Got to, though. As if enough weird stuff hadn't happened already, the last guy to throw dirt onto the coffin picked out one of the spades and started shoveling non-stop into the grave. In a minute, another guy from the synagogue joined him. It seemed to me like they were doing it just to be spiteful, you know? I mean, the rabbi tried to stop him, but then they only shoveled harder. As I'm watching this, something about seeing this red clay fly reminded me of the time that my stepfather and I were putting in fence posts for my mother with a 2-man auger. Suddenly the bit got hung up on a rock, the turret lurched, throwing my stepfather off and leaving me spinning around, yelling my ass off, and all of a sudden I could see the poetry and the justice in what was going on, and I knew I wanted to be a part of it. Now, this right here is one of the most hands-on gritty things I've seen every day. And I picked out one of the spades and got busy. Hey, you guys in such a fucking hurry, huh? Watch this. What? Am I shoveling fast enough for you? You assholes. And I broke a sweat in my dress suit, and along with the other 2 guys, filled up the grave in about 20 minutes. Last ceremony was over. The rabbi said the final benediction. As I turned from the grave, I saw the hard hat sitting up in the cab staring down at me. I stared back. Take that! Back at the house, there was a reception. Now, there's yet another custom, really very superstitious, of washing your hands before entering the house. A pitcher of water and towels are placed at the front door for that very purpose. It's to rinse off any unwelcome spirits that might have hitchhiked home with you from the cemetery. I'm thinking that on that day, they might have hosed me down for an hour. It wouldn't have made any difference. Ah, yeah, you see. So, this guy stops by that we grew up with, to pay his respects, and he offers to give my brother and me a nostalgic tour of the city, ending with an inspection of our old neighborhood in West Philadelphia. So it's the next day, right? And, I'm getting myself together because I want to check in on Mom and, grab a bite to eat before we head out. And I find her having coffee with a couple from the synagogue. And I say my good mornings, go and pour myself some flakes, listening to the old folks chat. But in a minute, I'm paying real close attention to what the elderly gentleman there is talking about, because he's saying he's talking about how we filled the grave by hand. Filling a grave like that, he's saying, is something that only the Orthodox do, a ritual having profound spiritual connotations. Wait, that changes everything. Oh! I was decoyed! Faked out by demon gravediggers into performing an Orthodox Jewish burial ritual. Oh! Old stepdad would have loved that. Hey, wherever he is right now, he's probably laughing his ass. Right then, the doorbell rings. Our tour guide is right on time, saying our goodbyes. I'm feeling a little out of sorts, what with this new development and all. But we head down to Center City. I don't know, it's been like 30 years or so since I've seen my hometown up close and personal like this. It's a hell of a bustling place. And as we roll along, the familiar sights remind me of younger days when we thought we owned this town. So we head through Center City, head about 30 blocks west, cross over the Schuylkill River, hang a right on 52nd Street, following this bus route we used to take so often when I was growing up. Along the way, I catch a glimpse of my high school sweetheart's house. Hey, no way I could forget her. My first love. Ours was no mere commingling of teenage hormones either, Oh, no, in keeping with the times, ours was a social experiment. And the overwhelming weight of the evidence proves conclusively that, if you want to give a Jewish mother heart palpitations, let her catch her post-pubescent son in bed with a black girl. Oh, yeah, drop a Jewish mother like that. You know old stepdad had a fit. We almost came to blows over that one. Well, we roll on, pretty soon we come up to our old high school, Overbrook. An enormous place. The original Cooley High looks like a cross between a factory and a castle. Which is funny, because it was sort of both those things to us. So then we head across 59th Street Bridge, hang a left, a right on Upland Way, a left on 56th Street. And there, right there, my God, is the old homestead. My cracky. 2 doors from the bottom of Moore Street, the place where we was born and raised. And there on the corner is our favorite court for playing this kind of all-terrain handball. A well-hit ball that had you heading back between parked cars for the return volley. Our tour guide throws the van into low and rolls slowly by as we take in the view of this place that once meant everything to us. It says the old neighborhood had gotten pretty run down, but There's been some urban renewal of late. So I'm turning right up the driveway, and he heads up this stretch of concrete slabs that was our playground, and where we can catch a glimpse of the back of our old house. And I'm like, oh, hey, oh, stop the van, stop the van. Look. The cellar door is open. Look, stop the van, I'm going in. And I open up the side of the van and head off to see if I can actually gain access to this place, this old haunt, holding a million childhood memories. To get everyone's behind me, I get up to the door, and I see a crew of construction workers pouring concrete. Excuse me. Pardon me. Yes. We used to live here in the 50s and 60s. Would you mind if we had a look around? My eyes go wide as the foreman admits us. He's happy to show off the work that's been done to the place. Well, now this one right here was a crack house before they started restoring these old homes. Okay. My childhood home turned into a crack house. I can't exactly wrap my mind around that. Most of the architectural details are missing, but then a few remain there. Right there is the worn, narrow wooden steps leading up to the dining room. How many times did my brother and I come down those steps wearing these goofy straw hats that our grandmother brought us from the Bahamas, pretending that we were on safari in our father's workshop? Climbing those stairs, we walk out onto a glaring whitewashed dining room. To our left, the foreman's proud to point out the newly remodeled kitchen. We all nod our approval, but I can't much pay attention to that. Oh, but there, in the living room, is the original black tiled fireplace with the huge plate glass mirror. And as I stare at it, I can see the family portraits that were once there, and the silver candlesticks, and my parents' dance contest trophy, and the 2 cast iron owls that stood guard in front of the fireplace. And right over there was our huge Motorola TV, black and white, a monolith in its white birch cabinet. My brother and I could be found sitting in front of it every Saturday morning, watching cartoons and eating Frosted Flakes. It's a childhood delicacy. And my brother was always pleased to serve me until I was old enough to serve myself. It was behind that TV that our father would hide gifts that could only be found by following the clues to a treasure hunt that he devised. How he'd laugh and Mom would tear up at our delight when we finally discovered that secret spot. I'm getting misty floating through these cloud white rooms. There's the original banister leading up to the second floor. It's painted brown now. Some of the balusters have been replaced with 2x2s. How many times did my brother and I sneak down in our pajamas and look through those spindles at what the grown-ups were doing? How many times were we invited down to meet some of our parents' guests and, maybe sing a little song that we knew before being hurried back to bed? So atop those stairs, I'm feeling a little apprehensive for some reason. There, right there's my bedroom till I was 8 years old. And though whitewashed now, I can still see the blue patterned wallpaper of the room that was first mine. Hey, you remember one night I toddled out half asleep to go to the bathroom, forgot to hang a left, kept going to the master bedroom and peed on Mom and Dad's bed? tell that one. Look, this is where you used to make shadow puppets on the wall. You remember that? To entertain me. You remember that? Oh, right over here. This is where we used to take firecrackers on the 45 RPM records, light the fuses, sail them out the window, and pretend we were shooting down flying saucers when they exploded in midair. You remember that? Look. Oh, the bathroom's just the same. And that's where Dad died. That's where we found him. Collapsed beside the toilet. And Mom in there crying. How strange is that, huh? To have come upon this spot, on this of all occasions, to come face to face again, full circle. The first time a father departed. Stunned, turn away and head down the stairs again. Do one more fond look around. The foreman shows us out the front door. Days grown cloudy and cold. Once back in the van, I find that I'm pondering the day's events with growing wonder. Okay. I guess what? I must be dead now because today I have surely seen my life pass before my eyes. Okay. Now everything I just told you happened in 2 days. Back to back. Bada bing. I mean, what are the odds? Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, shit happens. And not only that, it was all my impression of things anyway. I mean, you know, everywhere I went there I was, right? Yeah? Fine. Let me tell you what happened on my way back to Cincinnati on day 3. All right, so I'm heading back the way I came with a stopover in Chicago, and you know I got a veritable flood of vivid images, and at least a few burning questions floating around my brain. Not the least of which is what exactly is the significance of filling up a grave by hand. So first thing when I get back, I find myself a Hasidic rabbi, which is as orthodox as it gets, and what I got is. It's like showing you care enough to get your hands dirty. You know, it's like going to the greatest pains you were ever put to tuck someone into bed, so to speak. So it symbolizes a ready acceptance of mortality. I mean, even to where you're willing to help out with the most disagreeable chore. Oh, wrap your head around that for a minute, huh? Okay. Now, you're going to think I'm changing the subject, but I'm not. Let me tell you about the football player. Oh yeah, should you not? There is a football player in the story. Let me tell you about Reggie White. Reggie White was this real big deal Hall of Fame defensive player for Green Bay in the 90s. He tackled more guys than anybody. Albeit, one of his coaches once said this about him, quote, there's no question he's probably the greatest to ever play the position, but more significantly, I've never been around a guy who has more legitimate concerns for his fellow man. If you were to look at one guy whose demeanor and whose mode of living is an example for all of us to follow, It's Reggie White, unquote. So by him, the guy's character was easily as impressive as his, performance on the field. But this was no hype. See, Reggie White was an ordained evangelical minister. In football circles, he was known as the Minister of Defense. But I never heard of him. I don't follow football. But on this day, I decided to have lunch in a sports bar located right next to my gate of departure at the airport. Now, as it turns out, Reggie White had had a very untimely, fatal heart attack too. Now, had my stepfather not died shortly thereafter, I would not have purchased airfare that had me laid over in O'Hare on my way home from his funeral, and I wouldn't have decided to have lunch in a sports bar waiting for my flight to board, and I wouldn't have been anywhere near a television broadcasting ESPN, and I wouldn't have looked up at that precise moment in time to see the hulking 6'5", 304-pound Afro-American all-pro defensive end evangelical minister wearing a yarmulke and a prayer shawl, rocking back and forth, reading from the Torah in Hebrew, looking for all the world, like my stepfather every day in our living room. After everything that I had just been through, that was the coup de grace. And I got to tell you, you hear a lot of people say that, God is just an absentee landlord. My personal take on the matter, and I say this with no little wonderment, my personal take on the matter is that God likes to fuck with your head until you don't know what to think. Until you don't know what to think, except that there is a God. Now, I know I told you that my stepfather was this really devout guy. He was old school, right? He believed in doing good and in giving back, and he lived by those beliefs. Right? And I told you he was a really difficult guy too, right? He was self-righteous, and a lot of people resented it. He couldn't tolerate it if you couldn't live up to his high and mighty standards. My mom said, people either loved him or hated him. So nobody was ever on the fence about this guy. Except for me. Over the course of the 40-odd years that we were stepfather and son, he pissed me off royally on more than a few occasions, and I was always glad to return the favor. But I knew that he was truly fond of me. I told you I always had some real mixed feelings about the guy. I didn't know whether to admire his aspirations or hate his guts, and I know that he knew it. But of all the values that he held dear, devotion to family was the most important. My mother was the love of his life. She accepted him in spite of his flaws. And I figured that if anything troubled him about dying, it was the idea of having to leave her alone. So maybe just before he died, he said a special prayer. said, "Dear God,
Yeah.
I know the way things are going. My stepson hates my guts a little, but please don't let him have hard feelings towards his mother. Let him know how important his love is to her. Fill him with the devotion to our family that I have always felt." And then maybe the answer came from on high. "Behold, thou speakest with a pure heart. Now, what do you figure I gotta do to get your stepson's attention?" I mean, I don't know what the hell is going on with all of this, but it sure got my attention. Sure as hell got my attention. Oh, so what do you think? Yeah, you haven't said much. What do you think? Am I making too much out of this? I mean, please, tell me I'm losing my mind. It would be a relief. Not you. Well, so, now that stepdad is gone, no doubt we'll be keeping a close eye on that darling mother of ours. She's been through a lot. And that's something. It turns out what I have to tell you is what my stepfather would have told you. Where people cherish one another, that is family. And where there is family, no obstacle, not misunderstandings, not hard feelings, not resentments, not even the passing of time. No obstacle to their love is so great it can long keep them apart. And I'll tell you something my stepfather never figured out. Until you can forgive. Until you can forgive people their shortcomings, you will never find forgiveness for your own. Oh, well, that's it. Good night. May you find God everywhere and family in everyone. Shalom.